theyeshiva.net.
Good morning, everybody. Bruchim Avoyim, welcome. So today we'll begin a new mimer, Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. In Eretz Yisrael, it's already Parshas Shlach. And in Chutz La'aretz, we're getting to Parshas Shlach. So we're going to learn a mimer on Parshas Shlach. Please turn to page 79. On top it says Shlach, the first column. In the Hebrew, it's Mem, column 1. Mem, column 1. This mimer, it begins, Gar, with a whole inyan connected, as we'll see in a moment, to Parshas Nesachim in Parshas Shlach. And then the second half goes into the story of the Meraglim. And the mimer really represents a major paradox in life that the Meraglim, the spies, had a very difficult issue with, as he's going to explain. So the first half of the mimer is going to explain one side of it. And it would seem, as usual, you're learning that, that's it. And then the second half of the mimer is going to say, but, there's a big but. So the first half of the mimer builds a certain perspective on reality, and then the mimer shifts sharply to another idea which would seem opposite, and that's what the message will show how the Meraglim struggled with that. Now, just to understand the context of it, the structure of Parshas Shlach is a very difficult one to understand. The first half of the Parsha is a very clear structure. It's the story of the spies. Moshe Rabbeinu sends 12 spies to scout the land of Canaan. This is, of course, in order to help the Jewish people feel better about going in. They're going to give a report. They're going to discuss what's going on. Strategy, conquest strategy, etc. We know the result was a colossal failure. They come back and they dissuade the entire people from going into their homeland. They create national hysteria and panic. And everyone, 10 besides the 2 spies, Yeshua and Kalev, all become part of this major, they become prophets of doom, predicting the worst of the Jewish people dare to enter into the land, which really it takes away from everybody their desire, their stamina, their interest. They just want to remain in the desert, and that's what happens. That's the story. The next morning, some Jews want to go up. Moshe says not to go. They're called the Mapilim. The next piece in Shlach, if there's ever things that seem disjointed, it's this. This is chapter 14 of Bamidbar. That's Shlach, is Perik Yud Gimel, Perik Yud Dalet. Perik Tesvav, Hashem speaks to Moshe, and he starts telling him a new mitzvah. And what's the mitzvah? That's going to be the beginning of this mimer. Ki savoyu al eretz mishvoisechem. When you come to your land, they're not coming any soon. They're staying here 40 years. But that's the first mitzvah. When you come to your land, eretz mishvoisechem. So what does he talk? What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is going to be different offerings that you bring. Different offerings, different korbanos that you bring. Okay, so Moshe says that you'll bring offerings. So together with the offering, there's something called Nesachim. Mincha and Nesachim. What's that, Mincha and Nesachim? That you bring together with the animal, you bring what's called a mincha, which is a meal offering, an offering from flour, from silas. And you bring an offering, libations, you pour wine. It's called Nesachim. Nesachim means to pour. Nesachim. And the question is, if it's a sheep, if it's a ram, if it's an ox, the different types, these are accompaniments to the carbon. So you didn't just bring an animal. You brought also a meal offering, a mincha, that was burnt on the Mizbeach. Part of it was burnt, or all of it, depends what type of mincha. And then the Nesachim, you poured wine on the Mizbeach. That's basically the next chapter after this. Then comes a mitzvah of challah. Then come other mitzvahs. So Rashi says, what's the connection? Rashi says, Bisalem sheyikonsu la'aretz. After this whole catastrophe, Moshe said, don't worry, you're going to go in. There's even a mitzvah when you go in. But they could have discussed any mitzvah. There's a lot of mitzvahs when you go into Eretz Yisrael. He decides from everything. It's not like this is the Parsha of korbanos. Parsha of korbanos is much, much earlier. It's Vayikra. But right after the Meraglim, this is the discussion. Pouring the wine on the Mizbeach that came with certain korbanos. So that when you read this, you could say, okay, it's just one theme, another theme. But this means, and that's going to be the main idea behind this mimer, that this structure is essential. Somehow you can't understand the first part of the story without the second part of the story, without the mitzvah that comes after. Almost the mitzvah that comes after is a beer, it's an explanation. Now that would seem like a very strange theory because it seems so disconnected. At best, it's a good news, you're going to one day come into the land. But this mimer is going to show otherwise. So let's begin. The Parshas Nesachim, right, obviously their mistake was they didn't want to go into the land. And in order to explain it, he speaks about this particular mitzvah, not even korbanos. When you bring a korbanos, he discusses elsewhere. But he starts saying, I'm going to discuss the wine that you bring together. Which it also seems very out of context. When you discuss korbanos, discuss all the details. No, the details we're not going to discuss. Parshas Shlach, he discusses what the korban comes with, a mincha and Nesachim. The Parshas Nesachim ksiv. Nesachim again means libations, pouring, because they poured the kohen. For example, every morning there was a korban oila, just an example. Every morning there was a sheep, a morning and the afternoon, right? So that oila wasn't just you brought a sheep, you slaughtered a sheep, took the blood, sprinkled the blood on the mizbeach, burnt the fat and the meat on the altar. That's the korban itself. But there was another thing that happened, called the korban mincha and Nesachim. The kohen would go up to the mizbeach and pour wine every single morning, nisach every morning. You're talking about 365 days a year. Yom Kippur too, every day. Pour wine on the mizbeach every single day. And other korbanos too. I'm just giving the korban that came every single morning. That's why you always see Shabbos, whenever you do a korban musaf, you'll always speak about v'niskehem, right? V'yom HaShabbos shnei chvasim b'nei shonat mimim, shnei esroinim, soilas mincha. You remember this? Soilas mincha blulu Hashem and oilas Shabbos b'shabbatoi, al oilas hatamid v'niska. He didn't only bring 2 sheep on Shabbos as the korban musaf. It also came shnei esroinim soilas mincha, a certain volume called 2 esroinim, 2/10 of an ephah of soilus flour, and that went on the mizbeach. It was burnt flour that was burnt, flour from wheat that was burnt, and there was a wine libation that the kohen would pour on the mizbeach. Now, how much? How much? That the pasuk discusses how much each korban. You have to know how much flour, how much wine. It was all measured. It was all meticulous. Sukkahs, you would pour water also, but that was just sukkahs. That's called Nesachim. That was only sukkahs. That doesn't say clearly in Chumash. So that's why the Tzdukim didn't accept that. But Nisach Hayayin every day. So he says, Parshas Nesachim ksiv. It begins ki savoyu al eretz mishvasech. When you come to the land of your Moshav. Moshav means the land of your residence, where you dwell. V'asisem ishel Hashem, and you're going to make a fire for Hashem. Oila, oizevach. You're going to bring a korban oila, which is a completely burnt offering, or another offering, a zevach, another korban. Zevach means a sacrifice. So you bring also flour, meal offerings, and wine. Lahavin lama shina akasav Likkutei Eretz Yisrael kam b'shem Eretz Mishvasechem yosim b'chol ha'Torah shnikras Eretz Canaan. Usually, the language of Torah is ki savoyu el ha'aretz or ki savoyu el Eretz Canaan. When you come into the land of Canaan. Here, there's a change. Ki savoyu el Eretz Mishvasechem. When you come into the land where you sit, where you dwell. He says, he's not the first one to ask, Kush Yizum of where Medrash Seif Parshas Shlach. In Medrash Rabbi, close to the end of Shlach, this question is asked. In fact, the Medrash says that the Jews turned to the Rabbi Shalom. They said, why suddenly did you change your language here? From Eretz Canaan to Eretz Mishvasechem. Now you say, what's the difference? Eretz Mishvasechem means the land of your dwelling. But the truth is, you're not coming to the land of your dwelling. You're coming to the land where you want to dwell. But here you're coming to the land of Canaan. Canaan was, of course, a grandson, came from Noach's family. And he conquered the land, Canaan. And that's why it's called Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. Canaan is a person. One of the children of Chaim, who was a child of Noach. And already from his times, he conquered the land. He conquered it from the children of Shem. But here, suddenly, it's called Eretz Mishvasechem, the land where you live, where you sit, where you dwell. What? It's already given. Yeah, as though it was given already. As though you were living there already. Right. It's like you're coming back home. You're coming to your future home. They were never there. They were in Egypt. For hundreds of years, they used to live there hundreds of years before, but in hundreds of years, they were in exile. Okay, he brings a few other Madam Mekaimis, but after the parentheses, around 6 lines later, Hine Amr Razal, the Gemara says, Peirik Beis de Brachas. The second chapter of Gemara Brachas, it's Brachas Daf Yudalad Amid Beis on the bottom. Zog the Gemara, quoting Rabbi Yochanan, Kol HaKoyre Kriya Shema B'loi Tephillin, Kilu Hikriv Oila B'loi Mincha Zevach B'loi Nesach. You have to see how everything comes together here. The Gemara says an interesting statement. Somebody who reads Shema without Tephillin, he reads Shema, doesn't put on Tephillin. So it's as though you offered an oila without a mincha and a zevach without nesachim. It's like you offered a korban oila. Let's say the sheep in the morning is a korban oila, but you didn't bring a mincha. No meal offering. Aftzalachas. The sheep, yeah. The flour, not. Sorry. Huh? And another thing is you brought a korban, a zevach, another offering, below nesachim, without wine libations. What's the connection? What's Rabbi Yochanan trying to say? I mean, he could say it's not. In fact, right before that, the Gemara quotes Ula, who says, it's like you're testifying falsely. But here, he says it's a whole other inyan. Rashi says, and this is the pshat, Rashi says, it's not connected. I mean, Rashi says it's not connected. Rashi says the Gemara is trying to say, in Krishma it says you should put on tefillin. In Krishma it says, Kshartam lo yisal yadecha, v'hayu l'toytafa is beineinech. In Krishma it says you should put on tefillin. In the first section and the second section again. You remember, yeah? Right? When the Torah says you should bring a korban oila, the Torah says you should bring a korban mincha, and you should bring nesach. So just like if you bring the oila without the mincha, you didn't complete the mitzvah, it comes with more details. It's like if you want to do it right, do it right. And if you don't bring wine libations, you didn't complete the mitzvah. So he's saying the same thing. If you did krishma without tefillin, even the krishma is not complete. Because in krishma it says you should put on tefillin. That's how Rashi says. According to this, the connection is not thematic. The connection is not in the theme of oil and nesach. It's just, he found something where part of the mitzvah is missing. But the Alter Rebbe says, from the Lashon HaGemara it seems that there's a connection. But tzadich lav in inyan dimyan zeh, shemedam krishma la'oila v'zevach, utfilin l'mincha nesach. Krishma is somehow compared to an oila and a zevach. An oila is a complete burnt offering that's burnt completely, and a zevach is another sacrifice, because there were many types of sacrifices, where the whole animal was burnt, where part of it was burnt to fat, and the meat was eaten, etc. And tefillin is somehow compared to mincha, to the meal, to the flour, and to the wine. And that's why krishma without tefillin is like an oila or a zevach without mincha and a sach. Now, just to point out, because this is a natural question, and Rashi asks it, and Tosfos asks it, he could have said it short. He could have said, Kihilu hikriv, oila, beloy mincha, nesachim. Because the korban oila every morning had nesachim also. So Rashi says, and Tosfos says, you're right, he could have said it that way. But the reason he doesn't is because there's an expression in Vayikra, in Parshas Emor, oila, mincha, zevach, unesachim, dvar yoim b'yoimai. So he paraphrases, he employs the language of Chumash. Just that's why he does it, even though he could have done it all in korban oil, and the message would have been clear. But here also, that itself is b'diyuk. That itself is meticulous. That somehow the tefillin is captured by mincha and nesachim, and the krishma is captured by oila and zevach. That's the beginning, the introduction to the mimer. The Eretz Mishvei Sechem is the first question. That it doesn't say Eretz Knat. But the second question is this pshat in this Gemara about this comparison of tefillin to nesach. Okay, so now the topic changes quite dramatically, karag as usual. And later, Ershton in Siv Dalad of the mimer, towards the end of the mimer, he starts off Bazeh Yuvan Inyan Hamiragla. will understand the whole structure of Parshas Shlach. So this is not stam came in here as a stam. This whole thing is a real explanation on the story of the spies. Mem column 2. Mem column 2. V'hinei inyan hakarbonos sheyoyed eish min hashamayim al gabei hamizbeach v'atoichel esa'oil v'eschal v'ashlama. The whole concept of korbanos, offerings, Chazal say in Yumid of Chafalef that a fire, at least in the first Bais HaMikdash, there was a fire that descended from heaven. And it sat on the Mizbeach. Besides the fire that they created themselves, because it's a mitzvah l'havi min hahedit, it was a mitzvah for the Kohanim to bring lumber every day and to set it up. It's called the Ma'aracha. We say in the morning, Abaya have a Masada Seder Ma'aracha, Ma'aracha Gdoila, right? Ma'aracha Shniya. Ma'arachas were layers of wood, like logs, lumber that they would bring and set up on the Mizbeach in order to create a fire. They had to create a fire. There was always a fire burning. But there was also, in the first Bais HaMikdash, Yoyed Eish Min HaShamayim, a heavenly fire that would eat up the oila, that would eat up the carbon oil, v'eschal v'ashlam, and the fat of shlamim. Shlamim is another type of carbon where you didn't burn the whole animal, only certain fat of the animal. The meat was eaten, part by the owner, the person who brought it, or his family, or his friends. You could share it with others, people who are pure, and Kohanim would eat it.
Rabbi, didn't we have a different form in Bais?
Yeah, it says that in Bais it was Aryeh. It looked like it was crouched like a lion. The fire had the shape of a lion that was eating up the korbanos. The Zohar has an expression, Aryeh da'achal korbanin. It's like a lion eating up the animals, just like in the jungle, but here was a different concept. It's a very interesting idea because, in other words, what's happening in the physical jungle is a crude physical manifestation of a higher reality. In other words, you have the ecosystem and the food chain and the food web on Earth, but that evolves from the spiritual ecosystem and the spiritual food chain and food web. So once learned a whole mimer on that in the Likkutei Parshas Tzav. It's a fascinating man with Shimshon. If you remember the riddle of Shimshon. The riddle of Shimshon when the Kimei Az Yatsa Mosek. Okay.
But they were doing it drunk, and so that it was a caleb in Bais.
Right, and then it started, yeah. But the main thing was in Bais Rishon, yeah. From the Mishkan, it says Yom Hashmini, a fire came down. Afterwards, I don't remember what it says. V'cheina inyan b'krishma. This right away begins to explain the concept of krishma, because if by the korbanos there was a fire, a heavenly fire that consumed the animal, so this is the connection of krishma to an oila, or to a zevach. Why? The person is made up of 4 elements. Eish, ruach, mayim, afer. There's the element of fire, there's the element of ruach, air, there's mayim, water, and there's afer, earth. That's like in parentheses, just a reference to another mimer where this is explained in Parshas Bamidbar. Shehem b'chinas doimim tzemeach Chaim medaber keneged daled oisys shel Shem Havaya Baruch Hu shemisham nimshachu v'nesavu b'chinas elu. These 4 correspond to the 4 categories on our planet called doimim tzemeach Chaim medaber. Doimim means the inanimate. Doimim means silent. It's quiet, like vayidoim Aaron. Those things that are quiet. What's quiet? People are not quiet, right? Rocks are quiet. If you go to boulders are quiet, minerals are quiet, right? Pebbles are quiet, mountains are quiet, earth is quiet. Daimim is the inanimate, that which seems lifeless. Tzemeach is vegetation, the whole botanic kingdom, the whole world of botany, of vegetation, of growing. Whatever it is, grass, shrubs, herbs, vegetables, plants, all plants. The whole world of tzemeach. Of course, grain and fruits, etc.
What was it corresponding?
So then you have Chai, the animal kingdom, all the living organisms that we call living organisms in terms of animals, and that calls all the Chai. That includes fish, it includes birds, it includes mammals, it includes rodents, reptiles, insects, all bin Chai, of course, mammals. And then you have, of course, Medaber, the speaking living organism, the person who's called a Medaber, because of the power of speech. So he says, interesting that this corresponds to these 4. So within each person you have each 4. The Daimim Tzemech Chaim Medaber is in the planet. But within each person, he says, you have the Eish Ruach Mayim Afer. And he says it corresponds to the 4 letters of Hashem's name. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, That's the source of these four. Ubchinas yisoid ha'eish, ubchinas ha'chai. The element of fire is connected to the chai element. The element of fire, which is of course associated also with heat and intensity and blood and passion and life, that represents the chai, the animal kingdom, and the chai in the person as well. Of course, ruach would represent, but it would seem that ruach would represent the person. It says, Vayhi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. So the Targum says, L'ruach b'malala. Ruach, which also is connected to the word ruach is ear, so it's going to do the word ruach, spirit, or ruchni is spirituality. And then you have the other two, which are mayim and offer. Mayim and offer would seem to be connected to tzemeach and doimim. Tzemeach is connected to mayim, water, and doimim is offer. Doimim is offer. Tzemeach, of course, also needs offer. You need soil. But tzemeach is dependent on mayim, and it uses the offer, but it grows above the offer, it goes above, and that's connected to mayim. So doimim, tzemeach, chaim, but it seems like, even though he doesn't say it clearly, doimim is connected to the element of offer. Tzemeach is connected to earth. Tzemeach is connected to mayim, water. Chai, he says clearly, is connected to eish, fire. And medaber is connected to ruach. I'm just deducing it from the context. Right? You're not going to say medaber is connected to offer and tzemeach is connected to ruach, even though vegetation also, everyone is connected to all. And yud and hey and vav and hey obviously would go in the order. So yud is connected to medaber. The hey is connected, which is ruach. The hey of Hashem's name is connected to eish, which is chai, and then the vav and the last hey are connected to tzemeach and doimim, which are mayim and of. Ubchinas yisoid eish, ubchinas hachai. The element of eish, that's primarily connected to the element of the chai. V'hinei ksiv srofim oimdim. There's an expression in Yecheskel chapter 1, we say it in the Shavuos, the Haftarah, the famous Meiser cover, the vision of Yecheskel Hanavi. The question is Srafim Oimdim. Srafim Oimdim means the Srafim is a certain name of angels. The burning angels, called the Srafim. We say every morning, right? Va'oifanim v'chayis HaKodesh b'rash gadol misnasim l'umas ha-Srafim. There's Oifanim, there's Chayis HaKodesh, but then there's Srafim. Srafim Oimdim. Sheyesh b'chinas malachim v'chayis HaKodesh and Nikrayim Srafim. There's a certain state, a certain type or category of angels or holy animals who are called srafim. Why? Why are they called srafim? Because spiritually speaking, they represent the element of fire. So they're called burnt. They ask a question, can water become wet, right? Can fire burn itself? So he says the srafim, they are eish. They are eish. They're burnt up in which fire? Themselves. They are burnt. That is their definition. You call them srafim. There were certain tzaddikim they called the saraf. The saraf. Rabbi Uri of Strilis they called the saraf. Yeah. Some people call the Kotzker Rebbe the saraf. Saraf. The Uri of Strilis they called the saraf. They said that every day by davening he was burnt. He was burnt up. It's like you didn't think there's going to be anything left. Every day after davening, the Baal Shem Tov once said that one of the greatest miracles is that he stays alive after davening. The Baal Shem Tov said it's one of the biggest nisim that he stays alive after davening. For some people, it's a nes. So they call him the Saraf, the Buri of Sid. They call him the Saraf. So he says, "Shem Yisayda shall give it tamidem oimdim behislavos." They're always in a state of fire. Fire. Slavos is lav, a fire, zeal, a tremendous passion. Why? Machmas, interesting expression. Machmas she'en lem ki machshava achas kol yemei b'sheshes mebereches. Imagine, from the 6 days of creation, they only have one machshava. They're not disturbed by any other thought. What's this thought? Imagine you have one thought from the day you were created. Sheshes mebereches. Remember, malachim don't die like we die. So it's a long time. It's been 57, 82 years. It's a long time to have one machshava. You talk about meditation. One thought for 5,782 years. That's meditation. And nobody distracted. What's this machshava? Shemasigim rak ziv shchinosi yizbarach ha-mechayim ha-veris ha-yesh. It's the only machshava they have. One machshava they have. What's the machshava? Machshava is they comprehend one thing. They experience, they feel, they get it. that the Ziv Shchinasi is Barach, the presence of the divine energy. Ziv is the ray of his presence, of the Shechina, of the dwelling of Hashem, that creates them and vivifies them from nothingness into somethingness. They're just completely aware of that reality. So what does that do? Once they're aware of that, day and night, their fire doesn't cease. Their fire does not find rest. They're burning up in that own fire. They're basically made up of one element. And in that sense, there's a simplicity in their life. Pashut. Pashut in this sense, not just simplicity like a simple. Simple means you're pashut. They're divested from the complexity of the hybrid of elements. They have Yisoid Echad Pashut. That's who they are. That is their very identity. The Ziv Hashchina, that is what it creates, and they're aware of it. And their awareness is that Shchina, and they're aware of what their awareness is. They are aware of what their awareness is. Did you understand what I just said? So because they're aware of what their awareness is, so they're aware that their entity, who are they? They experience this process, this divine presence that vivifies them, and ve'ena murkavim, there's no, murkav means, there's no mixture, composite of elements. Mashenkin ha'adam, a person is very different. First of all, hu murkav medalad yisayvus. Person is not pashut, it's anything but pashut. We're composite of 4 elements. So there's Eish, but there's also Ruach, and there's Mayim, and there's Afar, and they all have to live peacefully with each other. But as we will see, that's a complicated process. The Adam is a murkav of all the Yisaidis of the Bria, all the components of the Bria. Like we learned in the mimer of Shabbos, in the Likkutei Parshas Monsey, that Adam has kinship with every aspect of creation, because he's rooted in the source of it all. So there's a kinship with every element. So he says, the Adam, it's not Yisoid Echad Pashut. There's a lot of other elements. That's number 1. Number 2, V'gam hu melubash beguv v'nefesh achiyunas. Unlike the Srafim, the Adam is also manifested. He's embodied. He's embodied in a body, in a physical, visceral experience, and a nefesh achiyunas, and a biological consciousness. Lo yuchal lamoid b'madrego machshava achas kol yamav. It's impossible for Adam to remain in one machshava all the days of his life. This reality of Srafim, that since the day it emerged into being, there's only one thought that exists in the Srafim and nothing else, it's impossible for a person to maintain that. Why? Not because he's lazy. Not because he's distracted. That too, that's the second thing. But first of all, the Adam has so many different factors that define his consciousness. There's Eish, but there's Ruach, there's Mayim, there's Afa. Besides that, the Seraphim is pure divine energy. That's what it is. He's conscious of what his consciousness is. The Adam comes into a guf and a nefesh achiyunis, so there's a whole new identity that attaches itself to the person's psyche, and now the question is how I interpret who I am and who I'm not. So there's no way I could remain in that one purest thought all the days of my life. We'll soon see the machlokes of what the Meraglim wanted. The Meraglim weren't such rabble-rousers. They were serious meditators.
We're not like the archetypal types of human beings.
It exists on different levels.
Literally that we have from physical element. And,
Right.
Something similar.
Yeah. Each represents something. Well, there's the Chaim Hiyuli, Chine Mikol Makayim. That's true. The person has many components going on. Emes. There's no one machshava. But this doesn't mean that the person is not capable of this. Mikol Makayim yesh b'koyach nafshi elikis hatzimoyin miyisoid ha'esh kiri shvei esh al hebes yosem ha'malach. On another hand, there's something in the person's divine consciousness. There is in the capacity of his nefesh elikis, there's a thirst, there's a yearning from the element of fire, which is like a glowing flame in its passion and its yearning and its rising up. The physical flame is a metaphor for that simoyin, right? Like tzamalecha nafshi, kamalecha besari, be'eretz tzia v'oyev b'li mayim, in a parched desert without water. It's eish, it's pure eish. So he says there's something that's even deeper than the angels. What? Even though we're always taught, and it would seem obvious, that down here, the person spiritually is inferior to the angels. Angels are angels, people are people. He says that's true only from a very limited perspective. Because the person down here is manifested in a lavush of a guf and nefesh achiyunis. A guf is a physical body, nefesh achiyunis is that which animates the body. But the shayrish haneshama, if you go to the core, the source of every soul, of each person, according to his or her level, every person according to their state, you have to always understand this. The guf doesn't embody and manifest in a visceral way the entire presence of the soul. Only a ray. And the shayrish, the roots, just like by a tree, the roots are subterranean, they're under the ground. You don't see it when you see the tree. Like the foundation of a house. It's the shayrish, it's the root, but it's always there. Here, the shayrish is not under the ground, the shayrish goes up. It goes not this way, but that way, so to speak. I mean, it goes both ways, but my point is that we're not talking about physical roots. But he says, the shayrish haneshama, it remains lamaila. What do we mean it remains lamaila? It remains in its source, from where it was honed out, from where it was honed out, in the higher consciousness from where it was taken. And if you're talking about the neshamas in each world, where the neshamas are molded, they are infinitely greater than all of the angels in those worlds. And don't think it's different than your soul. That is the soul that's manifested and being embodied through your body in this world. It's the same soul. What does the Balatanya say? It's like what we learned in the previous mimer and Bahar about the concept of ha'ara, right? The ray of a light, the ray of the sun. The ray of the sun captures something of the sun. Something of its electricity, of its heat, of its power, of its warmth, of its glow. The ray of the sun has properties that all come from the sun. So when you talk about the neshama in the guf, it's like the ray of the sun. And that's what the body captures and embodies. And it's incredibly powerful. It gives life to a body. But don't think that captures the totality of the neshama. Or to put it in other words, my consciousness is the part of the soul that I'm capable of experiencing right now based on the tools that I have right now and based on what my body is channeling from that spiritual energy. And that can vary from one extreme to another extreme. How you define your I, how you see yourself. What's the story you tell about yourself? But whatever level it is, it's only a ha'ara of the neshama. The shayrish neshama, the core of the neshama, is far beyond that which is being channeled consciously and manifested through the body. Where is that? It's you. But it's the you that's not being embodied through the body in a visceral, physical way. Because it's beyond the keli of the body. And he says that level is much deeper than malach, much, much deeper. He says, Ein Ketz, infinitely deeper than malach. When you say a person is lower than a malach, be careful. A person is lower than a malach when you're talking about the way I'm experiencing myself through my body at a particular moment. When you're talking about the neshama itself, which is the person, you're talking about a reality that is far deeper than the malach, far more sensitive, far rooted in a deeper space of truth. So in a way you could say, we always say, the soul is in the body, right? You say, the soul is in the body. Well, the Rebbe says, wrong. The soul is, the body is in the soul. You see the difference? It's a shift. It's not You have a body, and in the body somewhere there's playing around some little kid, some neshama. Let's hide him. He's hiding somewhere in a closet. It's the other way around. There's a neshama. The body is in the neshama. The body is one aspect of how the neshama is expressing itself. You understand what I'm trying to say? Huh?
Paradigm shift.
Yeah, you don't say.
Oh, it's scientifically the same way.
Because
you see the aura of the person.
Yeah, the aura.
It goes
Right.
outside.
Yeah,
It's outside.
it's outside of it's much beyond the person. The halo, the aura, the neshama, it's much beyond. It's not the soul in the body. The body is in the soul. In the whole totality of the soul, there's one aspect that the body filters.
Same relationship as Shem and us.
Yeah. You speak about, for example, birth and death. What's birth and death? Right? Birth and death is basically this. It's that a certain aspect of the neshama is being channeled through this physical reality called the body, which is the miracle of life. What was pre-birth? I mean, even preconception, pre-pregnancy. What's after 120 years? Does the soul die? What death is there? What death? Something alive doesn't die. If it's alive, if it's life, it doesn't die.
If you don't kill it.
Huh?
If you don't kill it.
So what is it?
Huh?
After death, what is it?
Unplugged. The right term for death really is unplugged. Unplugged. What happens to the electricity when you unplug a refrigerator? It dies. All the electrons die. I'm asking you a question. You unplug your computer, you unplug the vacuum cleaner, you unplug the air conditioner. Here, we got our video got unplugged. What happens? All the electricity died? What happens?
It just doesn't channel through that.
It doesn't channel through the refrigerator. So what happens? So the food gets dried up and moldy. You understand? The plug allows the electricity to be channeled through the refrigerator, which is amazing. Amazing. When you unplug the refrigerator, the electrons didn't die. Electricity doesn't die. It's just not, you don't have the vessel, you don't have the wire. It's unplugged. So you don't have the wire to channel that energy. But the electricity is not affected. That's the whole yesod in Yiddishkeit of the nitzchias of a neshama, eternity of a soul.
That is a soul is like an electrical switch. That's what it is.
You're a scientist, aren't you? I'm giving a metaphor. I don't mean that the totality of a soul is electricity. Even though electricity is not the worst metaphor, because nobody has ever seen electricity. We have seen the symptoms of electricity. Nobody doubts the existence of electricity, but nobody has seen electricity. With your eyes?
Not with the eyes, but we know there is a current of electricity.
Okay, so we see the manifestation of it. Like we see the manifestation of a soul. We see the manifestation of God. So the point here is unplugged. That's what happens. After 120 years, it's unplugged. The guf right now is not a keli that is channeling the presence of the soul. But don't define the whole soul by that. And even when the guf is channeling it, it's channeling that which it could channel. So this shirish of the neshama, he says, is much, much deeper than the malachim. V'zeu afal gav de iu loy chazli mazli chaz. It's an expression in Gemara and Megillah, a beautiful expression. It says Daniel and the people near him were trembling. It says even though he didn't see, his mazel sees. It's a famous in the beginning, Megillah daf Gimel, daf Dalet. What's pshat? Even though he doesn't see, his mazel sees. So most people say, what's the mazel? Some mazel you have. He said, what's your mazel? You know, if you were to talk about your mazel, bad mazel, good mazel. He says, what's mazel? What does it mean, mazle chazi? Your mazel sees. Pirush, mazle miloshin yozil mayim. The word mazle comes from the word a flow of water, like nozel in Hebrew, is when something flows, when something trickles, right? When something is channeled. V'hainu sheirish nishmasei l'mayla shememenu noizel v'nimshech harasei l'mata. Your mazel is the source from which your consciousness trickles down through your body, that's channeled through the refrigerator. Mazel means your presence of the neshama pre the trickling down. So I may not see it, but my mazel sees everything. You'll say, you see everything. You, in other words, that water, that little trickle of water that your body contains, doesn't see it. I'm sorry, I don't see anything. But your mazel, which is you, it's the same thing. It's just the source from where it's noisel. Mazel is the mazal from where it's noisel. Again, noisel is like the flow, like when you have a pipe, a tzinor that channels the water. Your mazel sees.
Electric outlet.
100 years after this became a whole story of psychoanalysis that people, most of their behaviors are based on their subconscious, not based on their conscious. There's so many things I do, I don't even know why I'm doing it. Right? But here we're learning the shayrish of it. The shayrish of it is that the source of the neshama is completely transcendent, far beyond what the guf is channeling in a conscious way. And that's Iyu. It's the person himself. It's not a different neshama. It's not like your neshama goes through a surgery and 10% of it goes into the body. It's the same neshama. The question is what the guf is channeling in a conscious way based on its kalim. What can my eye see? The vision of a soul is from one end of the world to the other end of the world. What can a soul understand? In my body, the soul could see through my eyes. The soul could speak through my mouth. The soul can understand things through my brain. That's why before and after, the soul is aware of much more. It's just in the body, it's also aware of much more. But what the body experiences, I could see a half a mile, I could see 20 feet, I could see 100 feet, I could see a mile, whatever.
No, sorry. So the mazel that flows down is, I think, the more Bowman speaks about this relationship where one guy can't back out because the mazel somehow combined. And so it's not, is it a trickle through me, or is it a trickle that I participate in with everyone somehow? Or people that
On a deeper level, you're right. On a deeper level, there's where the souls are one. Yeah, that's different layers. Emes, even a deeper level of mazel.
and that's a level of the shomer where it flows.
Yeah. So that's the word afalgav the iulei chazli mazlei chazi. Mazli is your own shayrish. It's your own shayrish. There's some things you know even though you don't know them. You know them. You feel them even though you don't feel them. Say, my mazel feels. Who's my mazel is me. It's just the me that it's not easy to come to terms with. Because my vessel is a limited channel. And every change in life, every change a person goes through in life is when there's a little extra trickle from the mazel. I'm like, what? Much of the challenge of growth is, what is growth? What does real growth mean? Growth means there's a little bit of a stronger trickle from the mazel into your consciousness. And that's painful. You know why? Because, this is not me. No, let's understand this. It's not so deep. I mean, it's deep, but it's very relatable. Mm-hmm. There comes, al pi chassidus, it's not pshat that, we learned this in the mimer of Rabbi Hillel in the summer once. It's not pshat that something gets broken in a person's life, and now they have to fix it. It's much deeper than that. It's the other way around. I'm open to a new awareness. And because I'm open to a new awareness, so therefore, something old has to break in order to be able to be a channel for this new awareness. The Alter Rebbe always has an expression, every yirida is tzarech aliyah. What does that mean? Every descent is for the sake of an ascent. It doesn't mean there's some purpose in it. No, it means l'chatchila. Kadosh Baruch Hu maktim refuah l'maka. The pshat is, not good things could come out of it. No, much deeper than that. The reason something breaks is because I'm experiencing already a new vision. But the only way my system could make place for the new vision is when the system says the old vision is not going to work. It's broken. You need a new car. You need a new paradigm. You need a new machine. You need to change the machine. In other words, the neshama sent down a little of a bigger trickle. There's from the mazel to Iyu, there was a more intense flow. So that confuses the whole system. The old system gets confused, it breaks. So now it's ready. When you break down the wall, you can expand the house. If my kitchen is a small kitchen, I want to make a big kitchen, I have to break down the walls. That's not geschmack. You have to break down the wall. But if I don't break down the walls, I'm going to remain in a small confinement. So what happens first? You break down the walls or you have plans for a new kitchen? What should happen first? You have plans and then you break down the walls, right? You don't break down the walls to break down walls. You break down the walls. What's renovation? You demolish because you want to renovate, because you want to build. So the renovation is not destruction. You're not demolishing your house. You're trying to restructure. You're trying to renovate. Spiritually, it's the same thing. When the neshama is trying to renovate and expand, it has a vision. So it breaks down the old walls. But if you're not in touch with the mazel, all you see is my walls are gone. Oy, oy, oy. It's really, the house is expanding. If the house is expanding, you got to break down the walls. You'll put up new ones. Hopefully there'll be different types of walls. But that's the vart. An example? Yeah, sure. A person lives a life, yeah? Everything is flowing, kavayachal, well. And then something happens in their life and it shakes them up. Maybe something in their marriage, maybe something with their children, maybe something with themselves, maybe something financially, maybe something physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is. It shakes them up. And suddenly they're broken, or they're lost, or they're confused, or they're overwhelmed, or they're depressed, or they're looking for guidance, or they're empty, or they're thirsty, however it expresses itself in a person's life. So one way of looking at it is, there's a crisis. What do I do with the crisis? Which is a good question. But really, it's much deeper than that. What created the crisis was the new oil, the new light. The walls of my house, somebody comes and says, there's tractors by your house. They destroyed your whole house. I said, no, I hired them. I'm paying them. Really, what are you paying them? To destroy your beautiful mansion? Yeah. Why? Because I want a 10,000 square foot house. I don't want 1,000 square foot. In order to get 10,000 square feet, the walls have to go somewhere else. They have to destroy. They're destroying, they're not destroying my house. They're demolishing in order to put it up in a new place. You understand? But if I don't know that, all I see is destruction. So whenever a deeper level of mazel is flowing down, what does it create on the ground? What does it create on the ground? Chaos, absolute chaos. Everything was going. This was my highway. This is gefgangen, geflossen. I had my comfort zone. I had my hagbolus. Right? It's like an exercise, stretching, right? When you stretch and you're not used to stretching, what happens? If you lift weights that are pretty heavy, you're Charlie horse, but also your tissue gets torn. And when your tissue gets torn, it rebuilds in a way that it can deal with that new weight. So your muscles get stronger. Parshas biologically, that's how it works. So what's happening essentially is, from an neshama level, there was a deeper flow of consciousness. Because there's a deeper flow, so now the eye has to get ready for this new set, so for this new reality. So what do? I get rid of the old. So the old stops working. Why does it stop working? To open you up to a new vision, to a new awareness. So it's a whole different perspective. But for this, you have to see it from the perspective of mazel. B'steifes was ich sag? Doesn't mean it's not hard. When they demolish your house, you don't have where to live. You have to look for basements, right? It's not easy because you feel you feel very vulnerable. So emotionally also, like, what am I going to hold on to? But it's a very profound idea.
It's all about connecting to Hashem. You lose it.
Of course.
Cry out to Hashem.
It's the point is that you're not detached. You weren't thrown away. You weren't thrown under the bus. Huh?
Feels like it.
No, I know it feels like it. Yeah, of course it feels like it. It feels like it because it's painful. It's painful. If those walls protected me for many years, it's painful. It's painful, but doesn't mean it's not good.
Then it's worth it.
It's not just worth it. It's connecting to truth. It's connecting to your deeper reality. I could be in denial, that's true. Whenever a person goes to habits that are destructive, it's because they're running away from this. Always. It's too much. Leave me alone. Just get me out of this place. So I'll get drunk, I'll start eating, I'll go here, I'll go there. Just get me out of this place. It's too much. Why? Because I'm not ready to open myself up to my own mazel. You have to open yourself up. Your own mazel is much deeper than malachim. Much deeper than the angels. The only thing is that the Shrafim don't have this challenge because they have one machshava their whole life. And that's never challenged. It's one thought that flows through them, and that's who they are. They are their thought. And that's it. A person is not that way. That's what he's saying.
So how does that square with the concept of Ein Mazel Yisrael?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, draw.
Very good. The Gemara says, Ein Mazel Yisrael. So the Alter Rebbe teaches, Ayin Mazel Yisrael.
So it's higher.
Ayin Mazel Yisrael, yeah. Which is really the literal pshat. Now the regular mazel is, you understand? Ayin Mazel Yisrael. The Ayin is the Mazel of Yisrael.
Mazel is there.
It's Ayin. It's a different type of Mazel. Which is the literal meaning of Ein Mazel Yisrael. You're not defined by this Mazel, that Mazel. But the Ayin, which is Ein Sof, like we learned in the previous man, what Ayin is. I just want to learn Mamish another few lines. We'll go like 3 minutes. Just to finish the Inyan. V'hainu lefi Yisrael olu b'machshava. And this is because the Medrash says in the beginning of Bereshis, Yisrael olu b'machshava. Yisrael ascended Hashem's thought. Pirush. It's like by a person. We also learned this in the previous mimer, Sapsoise and Bahar. You can't compare one's thoughts to one's words. A thought is connected, is united with a person's soul far more than his words, because words become separate from you. They leave you. My words just left my mouth, and you could do with my words whatever you want. Sometimes people misunderstand me. They can even misconstrue me, misconstrue the words, intentionally or unintentionally. Not only that, you can also, lachsam piv, you could put a muzzle on your mouth and lishtek, be quiet. Mashenkin tchinas hamachshava. Thought, both things. It never leaves me. No thought ever leaves me. Number one, and number two, a person doesn't stop thinking. Machshava is always there. Ki hanefesh meleya eisius. The soul is filled with eisius. Internally, the soul is filled with eisius, with machshava. There's always eisius in the soul. The soul is always articulating itself through eisius. Kach knesses Yisrael. That's the mashal Yisrael olu b'machshava. We call Yisrael machshava. Why? Knesses Yisrael mekar neshamas Yisrael. Knesses Yisrael, which is basically the source that includes all neshamas Yisrael, where they're all one. Olu b'machshava ilah. They ascend in Hashem's thought, umiyuchadim b'mehusi v'atzmusei mamash, and therefore connected with His essence. Just like these two things we said about thought, it never leaves you, and it never ceases. So it's a mashal. If you want to understand Neshamas Yisrael, Hashem's thoughts. What do you mean Hashem's thoughts? Always one, always connected. Never leaves, never detaches, never becomes separate. The whole world is called the Dibur of Hashem. Bidvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu, Basarim Amaris. Because it could become, at least from our perspective, externalized and concretized as something outside. The soul can never ever be separate. There's no such a mitzias. It's like machshava. It never leaves you, never becomes separate. And it's always in me, it's part of me. It's like the divine processing Himself. The neshama's experience of reality is a divine experience of reality.
So neshama is a thought of Hashem?
Yeah.
So every neshama is
A neshama is a thought of Hashem. Now think about that. Think about that.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. A neshama is a thought of Hashem. That's what it is. We don't, like we say, I have a neshama. No. You don't have a neshama. Huh?
That was a thought of Kodesh,
not-
to experience life.
Yeah.
That's,
It's not you have a neshama. Neshama has you. It's very, that's what I was, It's not you have a neshama, like you have a thought of God. No, you don't have a thought of God. It's like you have God. No, God has you. Huh? Yeah. Your goof is the thought, experiencing it.
So the definition of I is really it's a flow.
The definition of I is divine thought. It's a thought of Hashem. It's a consciousness of Hashem. Now, if a person really internalizes that, it changes everything. You're never as small as you thought you were, or insecure. All insecurity, and of course trauma, is shutting down this awareness. I can't get in touch with this.
Also, it's sometimes maybe it's too big to carry.
Yeah, it is. It's very big to carry. It's extremely big. And because it's so big, it's mazel. It's called mazel. And when I get in touch with it, the more I get in touch with it, the more systems it shatters, it shakes up.
Wait, what's the thought?
You. He says the neshama is a thought of Hashem. That's what it is. And a thought never leaves the source. My words can leave. My thoughts never leave. And the thought is always there. You always have thought. It's not like, okay, we're shutting down thoughts. For a week, God says, I don't know you. No. It's always, there's always a flow. In other words, if Hashem is here, the neshama is here.
So it's like He programmed everyone. Is it what it is?
I don't know, programmed. Hagam d'ksiv kilei machshavosei machshavosei. It says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. So what are we giving this whole marshal very nice? It says, Loi machshavosei machshavosei. According to this, no, my thoughts are your thoughts. Every one of your thoughts is my thoughts. Mikol makom emes. Harei efes katseyu v'shemetz mineyu tikach haznenu lahavin ma'at mizer al derech moshe. True. But a little bit of it, our eyes, our ears can use to understand a little bit of what a neshama is. So we're using this metaphor. Even though I'm going to use my machshava to describe his machshava. On a deeper level, what he's saying here is, it's a word from the Baal Shem Tov. It says, Yazov Rasha Darkoi v'ish oven machshavoisav v'yoshav al Hashem v'rachamei v'alokenu karbel esloyach kiloi machshavoisem machshavoiseichem v'loi darcheichem deracha. So there's a amazing word from the Baal Shem Tov. Yazov Rasha Darkoi. The Rasha should abandon his derech. V'ish oven machshavoisav. And a person of oven, of iniquity, should abandon his machshavas. Why? Because what does he think? He thinks kiloi machshavoisem machshavoiseichem. He thinks that his thoughts are not my thoughts. V'ish oven machshavoisav. His challenge is he thinks that his thoughts are not God's thoughts. Which is, of course, a deeper element here.
It's a tremendous vulnerable place of trust to think that everything channels through me is actually his thought.
It's extremely vulnerable.
It's like, whoa, I could bring him into a very wrong place per se, right?
How do you explain when a person chooses to go with
Yeah, but it's like you have to have full trust to make sure that
That's why he trusts you. Now, when a person is unaware of this, right, his thoughts could take him to places that may be very low, because the person doesn't realize this.
What if it's God?
It's God's thoughts that the person... It's a good question. The answer to that is, it's God's thoughts.
yeah.
Right, so...
Because-
the hearing part?
Yeah, that's
A thought can put you low, but that's from that low you can actually make tshuva to the highest place possible.
Right.
So that's what you were explaining. But
Shvuas with David and Bathsheba. From the lowest place, you can also do tshuva to the highest place. And usually the reason the person's thoughts can go so low because that person is unaware or is numb to it. Yeah. Right. You could change the machshava with a different type of machshava. Yeah. Well, the neshama is Hashem's machshava. That's what he's saying. But that's the neshama. The way the neshama comes into the body, that's what he's going to say the next piece. Yeah.
Hashem, there's no low and no high. The low is
And a chanami. But the way the person consciously experiences it, on one level,
Because otherwise, how could it happen? He's going to say this. Okay.
yeah, we'll see. He's going to continue. Okay, we'll take up separate. So what does it mean to have control? To have control really means to tune in to this truth. What does it mean to have control over my
That
thoughts?
concept where it can
It really means to allow myself to let go and experience myself as a divine thought. That's what it means to have control.
You're saying control is letting go of control.
Control is always letting go of control. That's what control means. Control never means control. That's not control. That's manipulation. That's desperation. I'm going to control. Real control, real self-control means letting go of control. That's what real control means. A lot of people don't realize that. That's the way you really control, in a good way. You allow the truth to control. You don't have to control. Why you control? You're going to play with me. You're going to manipulate me. You're going to scare me. Huh? When I let go of control, it's a much deeper control. It's a relationship. It's real. It's Hashem's thought. It's I allow myself to be. I allow my body to be a conduit for Hashem's thought. The neshama is Hashem's thought. That's what a neshama is.
Where's the person?
And Hashem experiences through me. What are you thinking? I shouldn't ask what you're thinking. I should ask what Hashem is thinking. So this is really the exercise. You say, what am I thinking? It's not a question. What does Hashem think? That's what you want to know. No. What am I thinking? No. Don't get distracted. And it's a very powerful idea because it always opens you up to a whole new dimension of reality. You understand? You're not stuck in a smaller awareness. Is the awareness. No, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Get out. And that's also true. You have to know loy machshavos, like he says here. On another level, of course, machshavos. You are my machshava. Not only your machshava, you are my machshava. That's the neshama. Neshama is alu b'machshava. They are the machshava. And that's never separate. Machshava is never separate. It's not like dibur. And machshava is always, the nefesh is maleya oisis. Hashem is filled with souls, so to speak.
I thought of another macho said electricity, pregnancy.
Pregnancy.
You're in Hashem. And then,
Okay, pregnancy.
And then the plug comes out, and death is not.
I hear.
Death is birth.
You're saying birth is exhaling and death is inhaling. That's what you're saying. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas Chaim is birth. God exhales, and after 120, he inhales. Okay,
Which is opposite.
you could do that.
Which is opposite of it.
Be'ezer Hashem will continue tomorrow, 7:45. So the haftarah for Natayna Sibur, Dirshu Hashem b'motzek, Rubi Yosef Karev, Yazev Rasha Darkei, V'ish Oven Machshavosav, V'yoshev al Hashem v'rachameyu, v'alkenik yarab l'sloya. There's noch dem Zokte, Ki loy Machshavosav Machshavosech.
That's the Aveda.
So what Pashtus meant is, Ki loy Machshavosav Machshavosech. But this is emes. So the Atif of the Taich, das is the Rasha Darkei, V'ish Oven Machshavosov, that he thinks he's detached. That's the ish of it. Machshavoi sov. Ki loy machshavoi sov machshavoi sechem. Obviously it's a remes and it's to touch the taich. That gufa that he thinks loy machshavoi sov machshavoi sechem. That is the ish of it. Das is the so machshavoi sov. He doesn't realize that the ganze ich is the ebershtas machshav.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.